I woke up literally overnight homeless. They dropped a nuke on our lives and nobody prepares you for something like this. Bitcoin saved my life. Self-custody is this quiet, invisible power that completely redefines how you walk in this world. It makes you untouchable, unconfiscatable. You have no idea how empowering that is when you can live on your terms. Believing in the fiat system is a recipe for financial suicide, in my opinion. It was a system created to steal, censor, and control. There's nothing else. It's a system of evil. That system now has become optional. For me, Bitcoin is like the ninth and 10th wonder of the world.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Tony Yazbeck to the podcast. Tony is one of the founders of the Bitcoin Way, a Bitcoin educator, self-custody, and cybersecurity expert with a Plan B residency. So good to see you today, Tony.
Paula, absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. Excited to get into this conversation.
Me too. For those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to Bitcoin.
Absolutely. I mean, I was one of the people that came into Bitcoin in the most brutal ways possible as a lifeline. I was a casualty of the banking collapse in Lebanon, where I woke up literally overnight homeless. Experiencing, the fiat destruction in real time is not something that you easily recover from or that you wish upon anyone else, because a lot of folks that I grew up with are no longer here because of that, unfortunately. And this is how my story, my journey to Bitcoin began, because after deciding to get back up on my feet, well, I needed a solution that made sense. And thankfully, literally thankfully, Bitcoin existed, in 2019 when I started paying attention to it, because in my case, it literally saved my life. I had to rebuild I wouldn't call it my wealth. I needed to build some sort of income stream to live hour by hour in the immediate short term. And what made things worse is that I wasn't alone. I have dependents that I have to worry about. And so you can just imagine the level of anger and shame and disappointment and just confusion that were taking place, all at the same time, because I was literally left alone in this mess. They dropped a nuke on our lives and nobody prepares you for something like this. So you can't, call someone for answers because everybody's in the same boat and no one has answers. And so you have to rely on instincts, which is really what we were forced into. Like Lebanon during that collapse was thrown back like a million years back into the Stone Age, where people survived for the most part by bartering, exchanging of skills. Like you'd think this is like something you only read about, in school in history books, but it was almost like an automatic, instinctive, reaction from, one day to the next, because there was nothing else. You go to the bank and there's like riots at the bank, people, trying to break in to see who's there to get their money back. Like it was a complete jungle. The worst thing you can possibly imagine happened over there. So that's what led me to Bitcoin I decided, well, if I'm going to rebuild my life, I need to understand, first of all, why this happened to me, how it happened, and if there's any way to prevent it from happening again. And so this is how the journey began. And I, focused on Bitcoin, learned it, tried to destroy it myself initially because I didn't believe it. It sounded too good to be true, even to myself. Considering the mental state that I was in, I didn't want to, set myself up for hopium, thinking, oh, okay, I found the next big thing and then it blows up in my face again. I don't think I would have been able to handle that additional trauma way back then. So I tried to blow it apart. Of course, I failed. Then, I dug in some more and then understood that governments before me, with all their infinite resources, they failed. And so that was way back then. You fast forward to today, it's impossible. So I'm not really concerned about that anymore. My focus right now is to really pass on the education, everything I've learned to as many folks as possible, to build an army, like an army of intellectual and sovereign individuals that no longer need to live and remain in a disgusting, corrupt, broken system that we've been lied to, believing that this was the way things are since the day we were born. It's not. And, you can't hold that against your parents because obviously they didn't know either. Back then, there weren't really any viable options. You can argue, yeah, the gold bugs, held on to gold and all real estate and what have you. And yes, to a certain point, that was valid until you realize that even these things, under extreme scenarios like the ones we're witnessing today, can and will be taken away from you, either by force or by sheer confiscation. So Bitcoin, the revolution behind this is that, first of all, we've never had anything like this exist in the history of humanity. And it literally is the only thing you can own. 8 billion people can 100% own a bearable asset, money, real money, not that inflatable garbage that we've been led to think is money. And so, but it requires us to learn something new, the same way that we learned how to drive or to do whatever it is that we did, we learned growing up, we have to learn this. And so that's where the challenge seems to be for a lot of folks because they don't come from a tech background and they automatically assume that they're too stupid to do this, which is absolutely ludicrous. This is not, we're not reinventing the wheel here. This is not nuclear physics by any stretch. It's just literally a series of 7 or 8 new steps that you have to become familiar with, repeat them a few times to build good muscle memory. And once that's established, this becomes like as normal as riding a bicycle. It's not a big deal anymore. But you have to get people open-minded and receptive enough to, make that first move into accepting this. And so this is really how I came about Bitcoin and how eventually ended up, founding the Bitcoin way, because after my collapse, my purpose now is to put an end to this, or at least, put as much influence as I can into making sure that that system dies, because it is not a good one. No one should be living in it. No one should be subjected to its abuse. And we're witnessing the end. And when things get towards their expiry date, you can't really control the outcome of that movie. But I can tell you one thing from my own experience, it's a very ugly finish. And so for those that don't want to have to experience anything remotely close to what I did, well, you're going to have to take the measures way ahead of time to ensure that you are going to be okay. Because if you don't do this, no one else cares about you. Trust me, nobody's coming to save you. You live, you die, nobody cares. You have to care.
Do you think some people would think, well, yeah, sure, that can happen in Lebanon and that can happen in Zimbabwe, but it's less likely to happen in the US and in Europe?
That is a delusion that many people live by. The banking system, just some context, prior to the collapse, the banking system in Lebanon was the standard to follow. Like we had 5-star banking, the most luxurious financial system out there that was, regularly written about in all the big magazines, the Fortune magazines, all these corrupt politicians. Now, in hindsight, they were praised as like Nobel Prize winners, like the PhDs of creative financial systems and all that stuff. And we had like a banking system that was insanely lucrative. At one point, they were giving away up to 30% interest on your deposits. And that lasted. It's not like it was like a 1-week thing. It lasted for over 2 decades. So, of course, people were going to come throw in their money there because you were essentially living for free. And that worked as long as people believed that, the bullshit, the Ponzi, and didn't question it. And it carried on until it stopped. And then everything fell apart. So if the Rolls Royce of the banking system can collapse overnight, every other country in the world is going to follow, because the mechanics of the collapse are not unique to Lebanon. The Lebanon is pegged to the US dollar. The US dollar has lost 95% of its value, 40% of it just as of the year 2000. Over $37 trillion in debt. There is no chance in hell this is going to be fixable. So it is collapsing. It is like the best one of all the shit currencies, but it is going down with the ship as well. So who's going to come first? Who knows? Could be Australia, could be the UK. Europe for sure is done. It's just a matter of when your turn comes. And the trigger to that collapse, I don't think will be anything sophisticated. In Lebanon, for example, again, for some reference, I'm not sure if you're aware what triggered, the actual collapse in Lebanon, but it was something as moronic as a politician thinking he can tax a WhatsApp conversation, right? Like, what kind of mental fool will even contemplate such a thought? But again, when you're desperate and all you've known your entire life is how to steal, well, of course you're gonna get creative, in finding new ways to steal. But as soon as word came out of this retarded idea, every citizen in Lebanon was on the street and the riots began. And that cascaded the whole thing. And one day to the next, boom, banks are gone, ATMs don't work, savings account locked out, nobody has access to anything. But in the same time where capital controls were imposed on the general population, you had billions of dollars being siphoned out of the country, of course, owned by the same thieves in the corrupt system there that were funneling their funds out. Because why not? Rules for them, but to hell with the rest of the people. So they essentially stole everybody's savings account. Doesn't matter what bank you were with. You all went to zero. Every one of us went to zero. So that system, that Ponzi, is the same no matter where you live, whether you're in Beverly Hills or in the slums. It's the same. You're identical on that front. So I know for a fact everybody's turn is coming. There's no maybe it comes. It's just when your turn arrives. Depending on where you live, it's sooner than later. But at some point, everybody flatlines. If you're still hanging on to the illusion that worthless toilet paper printed out of thin air by a bunch of thieves actually has value, and you're investing your time and energy into chasing that garbage.
Yeah, that's a powerful message. I still think that people in the US, and because we know the government is so powerful and the elites, especially behind the Federal Reserve, they are going to hold on to this power for as long as they can. I do believe there will come a time, but do you think that will be quite a long time away, or it could be quicker than you think? Because as you said, that was a bank run in Lebanon, right? So it's just something that triggers a bank run could end some of these countries.
Well, look, I mean, the U.S. is the last one to crumble. Obviously, it's a global reserve. But the dollar, everybody knows it's not just my opinion; it's a fact. Has lost, almost all its value, and most of it recently. So, how long they can hold on to that delusion is anybody's guess. But here's the good news: you don't have to care what happens to the dollar, because as of 2008. The dollar has became optional ever since the creation of Bitcoin, sound money that no living soul can manipulate or corrupt. The dollar and every other fiat currencies has now become optional. It's no longer mandatory. People still think it's mandatory because they haven't learned enough about Bitcoin or understood it enough to come to this conclusion. Spend enough time, down the rabbit hole, read a few books, watch a few videos, ask a few questions from intelligent people, and you'll very see how the pieces fit together and how you have an option to exit the cage, the fiat cage, because that's all it is. It was a system created to steal, censor, and control. There's nothing else. It's a system of evil. If you look back in history, all the bad things that happened in the world, how were they fueled? How were they funded? By infinite money, right? You hit a button, you print as much as you want. Sure, you can manage and run as many wars as you want. Like, who cares? Who's gonna stop you? You can infinitely print up until the day where an idea whose time has come materializes and somebody says enough is enough, this ends now. And 2008, whoever Satoshi Nakamoto was, that was his or their middle finger to that system. And it took, thankfully in its infancy, nobody was paying attention to it in the way that they are now, because I think if they did, they would have killed it. That's too late. That ship has sailed now, sailed far, far away. So there's no stopping this train, as famously quoted. Now, how many people understand this and take the measures now before they are forced to take it? That's anybody's guess. But there's a big enough movement globally, not just in the US, of people who understand that there's a problem. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket science to walk into a supermarket and see that you can't afford anything, right? This problem is not going away. In fact, it's going to get worse. The printing is not going to stop. It's going to accelerate because it has to in order to maintain the lifespan of this Ponzi. So it's like a lose-lose. When they print, those, that limited amount of people will, still have their purchasing power. However, 99% of folks in the country will not. And when you have a starving population, what happens? It turns violent, right? Because people have to eat, they want answers. And at that point, everything is a fair game. So violence against the government will become justified because, you stole my money, you ruined my life, I'm coming after you. How are you going to stop this? You've got like a hordes, on your case right now. So is this going to be avoided? I don't think so. Maybe delayed, avoided. I personally, in my strong opinion, I don't think so. So those that have opted out, the few right now that have opted out are going to be okay as long as they maintain jurisdictional safety as well. Because it's not just about protecting your money. If you're financially comfortable, but you're living in a dangerous place, then you haven't accomplished much. Because if you walk down the street and somebody just sniffs that you have some wealth on you, well, now you have a situation. You either get into a fight and it's, whoever wins, wins. I've lived through this. You don't want to do it. Most people don't know how to fight, don't know how to protect themselves, don't have the heart to do it. But, when you're reduced to your instincts, you're gonna have to fight. It's fight or flight. There's no choice. It's not like you have options. This is like an extreme doom and gloom scenario, but I mention it because I lived it. So if it happened to me, no one really is immune to this. And I don't believe because you live in X, Y, or Z that somehow you're going to be okay. You're not. It's just a question of when your turn arrives. So it's crazy that we're actually witnessing this. We're living through a time that this is actually taking place. I never in a million years thought that I would, be alive to see this. This is history in the making, 100%. In 50 years, 100 years, whoever's around then when they studied this era, I think they're going to call us morons because they're going to understand what kind of world we lived in, how we believed in bullshit money, and how we actually, spent our time and energy chasing it, thinking it had value. They're going to think we're crazy. Because if you describe it to someone today, what we're doing, it already sounds insane, right? But yet, if that's all you've known, your fear is that your fear of detaching from that is huge, which is why a lot of people remain stuck, even though they see that their situation is deteriorating. They're just incapable of unplugging. It's like almost like a drug addict. They know it's killing them, but somehow they need it more, right? Until somebody forces you out into rehab and cleans you out once and for all. This is what Bitcoin does to individuals that are tired of being used and abused as cattle, because that's how we are, right? If you're in the fiat system, if you're not part of that fancy club that prints that worthless paper, you are cattle to be used and abused as they see fit. So again, that system now has become optional. We have an option to upgrade our lives. It's an upgrade. You're going from rubbish to a quote unquote utopian sound money that for a fact that no living soul, no human being has any say or power or control over it. So why wouldn't you use it? And for the first time, you can actually own it. So logically, anyone with 2 cents of common sense in there would see that this is the way to go. But yet we're still very early into this journey. And unfortunately, the time frame for most people is not very big. So Bitcoin doesn't need 100% adoption to win. It's already winning. You need a large and just enough people to adopt it, which is what's happening here. And it'll exist, at least maybe in the short term in its own parallel world, but it will exist. And eventually that the world that is not inside that, deflationary world is going to see that the grass is much greener here and they're going to want in.
Yeah. And that's exactly the message we're trying to get to people, is that there is this system where you can opt out. But I always wonder about why more people don't. And you mentioned you had to go through a tragedy and you had a big need for Bitcoin, as did I. I realized my savings were not going to hold me over into retirement. And then there's a curiosity. And you mentioned that people get very conditioned to the current fiat system. Is there anything else?
Well, I mean, most people aren't capable of critical thinking, unfortunately. And, they usually take the path of least resistance. So if you're still living somewhere where you get out of bed, the sun is shining, your credit cards are working, you can buy your coffee. Okay, it's more expensive, it sucks, but you can still do it. Are you going to actually go the distance to question the system? Probably not. Until the day where you can't do anything, and then you're like, shit, now what? Is this likely to happen? I think so, yes, because most people have to be beaten in order to learn. Otherwise, the incentive is not strong enough. Sadly, I mean, like, I don't like saying this, but I can see it. And I don't have to go far. I see it in my own family. Like, can you imagine? I have members of my own family that have no connection to anything that I'm saying here. They think it's like, whatever. Even though their life situation is beyond hell. Yet, no, we gotta chase the dollar, we gotta work more, we gotta be more abused, and we gotta complain all day because that's all they do is complain. I'm like, all right, well, if you don't want to fix your situation, then you lose the right to complain. Nobody has the patience to, even I'm getting sick of hearing you complain because it's like a lose-lose situation. It's like listening to a broken record. You have a problem, there is a solution, you don't want it. If you don't want it, then shut up and just suffer in silence. But if you want it, there is help. I think most people around the world today still have that same mindset. The path of least resistance. Laziness is a disease. In my opinion, it's a disease that keeps you paralyzed in the worst possible situations. So, again, pain and only extreme pain can fix this radically. Smoothing your way into this, that's for like intelligent people that are able to think ahead, to see the signs on the wall, that people that read, that question, that dive deep, that don't just like accept the status quo. These people are already ahead of the game, and there's a lot of them, by the way. So the majority aren't doing this, but those that are not like an insignificant amount. This is why Bitcoin's adoption has grown the way it has. This is why you see a lot more circular economies right now. This is why now governments all of a sudden, they embrace it and all that stuff. It's because the adoption has grown so much, you cannot ignore it. You can choose to ignore it, maybe thinking in your head that somehow it's going to, disappear. But you're gonna wake up one day, with a very painful surprise if that's what you're doing. Bitcoin is not going anywhere. And when you understand the protocol, the technology, you understand why it's not going anywhere. It's peer-to-peer electronic cash. You cannot stop peer-to-peer. It's impossible. It's like saying the sun is going to stop. I'm going to stop the sun from shining or the wind from blowing. Like, how are you going to do this? It's like as moronic as it sounds. So if they weren't able to put an end to, meaningless piracy, peer-to-peer music, movies, software, you think they're going to stop peer-to-peer money? Impossible. And they've also tried to do it in the past 16 years. How many times have government tried to ban Bitcoin, make it illegal, do this, do that? How many times did they all fail spectacularly? Every single time. So they know this now, which is why their tactic has changed. People that don't understand money, or Bitcoin for that matter, cheer on nation state adoption. I don't. It's inevitable. It's inevitable because Bitcoin is for anyone. But I don't cheer it on because I still don't believe that they have good intentions. For the simple reason that their world and the world that Bitcoin was created for cannot coexist. It's oil and water. One was created to steal, kill, surveil, control. One was created to empower, give life, growth, the Renaissance, right? Like that type of world. How do they mix? And so the attacks against this by the corrupt system are expected to intensify. But they're not stupid. They know they can't attack Bitcoin head first. On a tech front, they can't. That's a fact. So how do they attack it? In the same way that a lot of clueless people are cheering it on, by embracing it, right? The ETFs, the Bitcoin treasuries, all that TradFi garbage that they're promoting using Bitcoin as a buzzword, this is how they attack it. So how is that an attack? Well, it keeps people dependent on them. So they embrace Bitcoin, but as long as it's their version of it, meaning you put your money in an ETF where you don't own anything, you put your Bitcoin in a bank where they have control over it, anything except for two words: self-custody, which is the entire point, the entire revolution behind Bitcoin, is you owning your private keys and your money. So find me any country, maybe with the exception of El Salvador for now, that promotes self-custody, right? You won't find it because, again, it doesn't serve their incentives. Bitcoin was created to obsolete them. They cannot embrace it. Logically speaking, they cannot do it. It's like shooting yourself in the foot, saying, okay, it's time for us to leave, and okay, see you later. You think they're going to do that? It's never going to happen. This is why Bitcoin was that slick roundabout way that they cannot stop. And so the way this grows is by pushing out the education.
Hey there. Don't forget to like and subscribe to help me grow the channel. Want to sleep easy? MICROSEED lets you stamp your seed phrase onto a small steel washer. Buy the device once and use it forever. I love it. It's discreet, precise, and easy to transport. Get yours below. The Bitcoin Advisor is a trusted team who can also help with inheritance planning. Just scan the QR code or use the link below. And check out these super cool SATOSHOEs with over 40 styles to choose from. Plus 10% off with my link below. Now, back to the show.
Fortunately, the legacy system is doing the work for Bitcoin, even though they're not aware of it. But as the situations worsen globally, as people lose purchasing power, as these wars pop out all over the place, as people's lives get destroyed or deteriorated or downgraded significantly, even the most retarded human being is going to start asking intelligent questions and looking for real answers. And eventually, at some point, all roads will lead to Bitcoin in self-custody, because it is the only thing, and I literally mean it, in my opinion, the only thing that makes sense. And which is why, again, at some point, I believe that even nation states are going to adopt it as the global national, like the global reserve of the world, because they know for a fact that there's no one else out there that can have an advantage over them with it. It's neutral. None of these guys trust each other. So what do you think they're going to settle on? They can't settle on anything that they know someone else might have an advantage. Prior to Bitcoin, they'd go to war, and whoever wins, well, that was the final answer. Well, now, my friend, there is an option out there that didn't exist, prior to 2008, and that is the game changer. For me, Bitcoin is like the ninth and 10th wonder of the world because it is that powerful. And yet, to this day, we're so early that so many clowns still treat it as an investment, still treat it as a stock to trade. They still play these TradFi games with it. They still try to integrate Bitcoin into a broken system to sell a service to separate ignorant people from their coins, really. Whereas Bitcoin is the simplest, most purest thing to use. You learn 7 or 8 steps, but essentially it's very easy. You have to forget about the old world, the dollar, the euro, the fiat system. You have to kill it in your mind. That is not money. That is slave money. As long as you remain in that system, you are a slave. Whether you want to accept it or admit it, doesn't really matter. It doesn't change the fact that you are a slave. And so that slave money, unfortunately for you, is rapidly losing value. So even if you think you're a millionaire or a billionaire, at some point, your purchasing power will also be a big fat zero. Because, if you look at Lebanon now, you look at Venezuela, Zimbabwe, there's a lot of trillionaires there. But they can't buy a roll of toilet paper with that garbage because it's worth nothing, right? So that is coming. So where are you going to put your money? Gold? Okay, it had value 5,000 years ago, but we're not living in that world anymore. We're living in the tech age. We're moving forward. Nobody's going back to the fax machine or the typewriter. We're moving forward, right? So, and it's not finite in supply. All the specs, if you want, of Bitcoin are unrivaled on every level. Scarcity and fungibility, permissionless, all of that good stuff. Where are you going to find it? It doesn't exist anywhere else. You just need people to understand it. And I am very bullish and optimistic on a lot more folks clicking it because I see it at work. When we started the Bitcoin Way 3 years ago, the questions we had back then are very different from the questions we get today. The questions we get today are very fine-tuned. Folks understand, they're like, I live here. My situation is a complete nightmare. Help me get out of it. The banks don't let me transfer money. The government doesn't let me do this. I work all day, all night. They rape me at the end of the month in taxes. What do I do? Well, you have to start taking steps to leave that system, right? But it's becoming very difficult because what we're starting to see now is a bank run on the world. Wherever you live, when these restrictions get worse, is because the thieves in power are fearful and they're desperate to remain relevant, right? So they close the only things they have access and control over, which is the on-ramps, the on and off ramps. They literally imprison you in their system, even though it's technically supposed to be your money, which is something that almost everyone today understands that it's not. And so how long that tension grows before it completely breaks and you start seeing like violent pushback, that's anybody's guess. I don't wish it upon anyone or anywhere, but personally, my gut feeling tells me it's going to be inevitable at some point, unless there's some miracle solution or compromise done somewhere that prevents it.
Yeah, which is unlikely. And I absolutely agree what you're saying because I have family all over the world and I see the bank fees in South Africa very high, Zimbabwe, Cyprus, UK. I see them closing banks when people don't use it for a few days just to try to get your money. It's not quite like that in the US. And I want to go back before we get to the self-custody part. I want to go back to the ETFs because a lot of people are still investing in those and strategy and many others because they feel it's safer for them. And then they're also pricing in US dollars. Those are two things that I notice a lot, even among Bitcoiners, right? So how do we get over that hump?
Well, I mean, the fear has a big role to play here, and of course, there are people that just don't care. Again, Bitcoiners that talk or shill about ETFs or Bitcoin treasuries. I don't consider these honest people. These are people that are just using Bitcoin as a buzzword and sort of trying to integrate it into a shitty system that Bitcoin was created to replace. When you buy an ETF, first of all, you're not buying any Bitcoin. You're buying, like you're buying a stock or a share that's denominated by dollars. So if you make money, you have to pay your taxes. Nothing changes. It's like no different from owning a stock. And if they decide one day they don't want to give it to you, well, of course, it's not in your control. They can just tell you, all right, buzz off now. We're keeping everything. That's a huge counterparty risk. Same thing for, the Bitcoin treasuries. I mean, for me, it's almost mind-numbing how people think that paying someone to buy Bitcoin for themselves is an intelligent move. Now, some people argue, well, there are folks or institutions that cannot buy Bitcoin directly because of rules and regulations. This fact in and of itself should make, all your light bulbs go off. It doesn't matter who you are, whether in an individual institution. Isn't it your money? Why aren't you allowed to do whatever you want with it? It's because it's not your money. You are given permission, like a good little donkey, to use it wherever they see fit. So, of course, you're stuck in that system. So they have no choice. So they have to buy the ETF because it's like the next best thing in a shitty situation. However, those that are in a position to go straight to the asset Bitcoin in self-custody, but who choose not to do it, those, in my opinion, are stupid people. People that refuse to think, people that have no common sense whatsoever, and are just lazy because they think that, it's good here. Everything will be fine. We'll be okay. We don't want to rock the boat. That sort of nonsense excuses that, people get very creative about. But that has an expiry date because, again, the fundamental system, the system in and of itself is collapsing. So when it does, what do you think desperate measures look like? Confiscation, locking out of the accounts. It's very easy, to acquire Bitcoin in a very budget neutral way if you steal everybody's coins, right? And what's the easiest way to do it? Put your hands on the ETFs, put your hands on the Coinbase stash, buy out MicroStrategy for nothing. There's many ways to do this in budget neutral ways. I hope it doesn't happen, but I mean, just thinking out loud, looking back at the history of how these things usually play out, for me, it's crystal clear what the movie is going to look like. And so, the fact that so many people still don't see it, or worse, refuse to believe that something like this is possible, that's why we're still early in Bitcoin. So, but again, that window of time is closing very, very rapidly. I don't think we have much time left because, unfortunately, these big boys understand that they need this. Whether they believe in the whole revolution and all that, which I highly doubt, but they understand that they need this because somehow they think they're going to build empires over it to extend the lifeline of the dollar or whatever, other hallucinations that they have. So they're going to take it one way or another. And that because the supply is finite, the regular pleb, people like you and me, will not be able to afford a UTXO. So there is a very strong possibility that you will go to bed one day, you wake up the next, and Bitcoin's dollar denomination is some ludicrous number. And so unless you're sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars, you're not buying anything because you can't afford it. So how do the plebs at that point benefit from Bitcoin? Well, there's only one way, is to earn it. When you go to work, you're not going to be, you don't want to be paid in worthless paper anymore. You're like, all right, now you pay me in SATOSHEES. And so that's how they start. The scaling happens on the layer twos and beyond. Owning a UTXO, like buying it and storing it in your wallet, that is going to be a luxury, like a wet dream for most people. It's not going to be possible simply because of how expensive it's going to be. And when that day comes, let's say, for example, Bitcoin is $1 billion. Who's going to want to sell it for those dollars? Like I get the argument, oh my God, Bitcoin is going to be worth $1 billion. I'm like, oh yeah, great. But how valuable do you think that dollar is when that day comes? And then they pause. They're like, what do you mean? What I mean is that your dollar is going to be worth nothing. So if you sell it for $1 billion, you've effectively traded real money for garbage. And then they pause. They're like, really? I'm like, where you been, man, for the last 16 years? Haven't you seen what happened around the world in other countries? And so, yes, that's exactly what's going to happen. Believing in the fiat system is a recipe for financial suicide, in my opinion. And the sooner people understand this and take, the steps to protect themselves, the better off they're going to be.
And is that expensive UTXOs, is that going to affect people in self-custody who even want to spend their Bitcoin or use it in a circular economy one day? Is that an attack vector?
No, not at all. I mean, people are already living on a Bitcoin standard. I mean, we're live examples of this. I mean, wherever you can spend Bitcoin for goods and services, you do it. In the situations where you can't do it, there's many other options available to you to sell, that specific amount of Bitcoin for the fiat that you have to, whether, for example, if it's an invoice you have to pay, and you're living on a Bitcoin standard, well, you could sell, that small amount of Bitcoin to get rid of that invoice, but then you keep your savings in Bitcoin. You don't like get rid of everything just to have a big cash amount. To me, that's like crazy. So over time, your purchasing power in Bitcoin on a Bitcoin standard is going to continuously go up. People that have come into Bitcoin, let's say in the last 4 or 5 years, you rarely hear them complain about money. because for them, purchasing power is up. They don't care. Okay, the prices are going up, but they're fine because so is the value of their Bitcoin. Real money, deflationary in nature, not inflationary, right? So owning a UTXO requires personal responsibility, self-custody, right? Like the whole premise of how to do this. This is where the revolution comes in, like this, and this is what we teach here at the Bitcoin Way, because it does come from the world of tech, and there's just certain steps that you have to learn. And you have to take it seriously. It's not hard. It really isn't hard. A lot of people assume it's like, oh my gosh, it's like mission impossible. It really isn't. Especially when you have a fantastic teacher who guides you, like literally hand holds you through that process. We are one of the most OCD teams out there when it comes to this. I mean, I'm the type of individual that I will upgrade and fine tune everything every single day, every 15 minutes, if I have the option to do it. And I will put out the recommendation to follow along and explain why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because to me, this is not a side hobby or an afternoon project. We are the heads of security now. Every Bitcoiner holding their funds in self-custody has 100% responsibility over ensuring that this stack, this fortune, this generational wealth remains as secure as possible. And as the value of Bitcoin appreciates, so will the attack vectors, just like with everything else. While the physical attack vectors may be a thing, I don't believe that they'll be as prominent as the cyber attacks, because now you have AI that exists, right? And as wonderful as that is, the tools for AI exist for good, but they also exist for bad. And so if the good is lazy or complacent or not paying attention, well, they're susceptible to either, become a victim of a phishing attack or like get duped into doing something of that sort. So you need to stay vigilant. You need to learn. The education is important. It's not a set it and forget it. It's a set it and continuously learn, but baby steps. Like once your foundation is in place, you're not rebuilding the whole thing each and every time, like there's incremental updates and upgrades. And this is very exciting. People shouldn't fear learning self-custody or think it's like, oh my gosh, it's like, I have to go to the gym now. I don't feel like it. No, this is very, very exciting. It's like almost like hitting the jackpot when you learn self-custody, because the way it upgrades and empowers your entire life, it's there. I don't know of any vocabulary word that can genuinely describe how powerful that is. Self-custody is this quiet, invisible power that completely redefines how you walk in this world, right? It makes you untouchable, unconfiscatable. You don't need permission from anyone. You have no idea how empowering that is when you can live on your terms, right? So people should be excited about this. This is not like it's not a workout. It's like, let me know how to do this. Air gapped wallets, Bitcoin nodes, or solo mining, all these geeky words are, to me, they're like exciting. And we work with so many people now. None of them, almost none of them, come from a tech background. In fact, most of the people that we work with, their age group is, I'd say, mid-50s, well into their 80s. It's not the young folks. We're working, and it's not intentional. It's just how it happened to be. And none of these guys come from a tech background, yet all of them, our clients, run a node. Critically important to run a node. They all use proper air-gapped wallets. None of the good enough type products that are out there. We're very strict about this as well. It has to be perfect. And, as new products come out, we regularly test everything. And if something is better, we will push out the recommendation almost immediately to upgrade. Because again, this is tech. You have to keep up with the times. It will get better. It will get simpler. It will get, a lot more fun to use. But you need to be on top of this thing. So for us, it's very exciting to teach people, and more importantly, to see people's reaction when it clicks. Like when you see someone, a regular person that has never done anything on a computer beyond its regular mouse clicks, now they're fully sovereign and they're sending and receiving Bitcoin, and they're doing it on autopilot, and they're sleeping well at night knowing that they don't care what the Fed says, they don't care what the bank says, they don't care what the politics say. Their money is safe. No one's taking it away from them. And they come and they tell you, holy shit, man, this is like a game changer. I'm like, yes, I know it's a game changer. Was it that hard to do? In hindsight, no, it wasn't. It just required the open-mindedness, the receptiveness to just sit down and learn and repeat it a few times until, it just, becomes like normalized. And once you hit that stage, and it doesn't take very long, everything changes. That's when you voluntarily go down that rabbit hole, because now your life is improving on so many levels. You just can't get enough of how nice your life has become. One, financially, you don't have to stress anymore. Two, when you start surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals, that is worth a million times more than the money itself, because you can't live alone, right? The people that we work with, the people that we've met on this journey, there is no money in the world that will replace those relationships. And this, in my opinion, is the number one benefit to, going down that Bitcoin rabbit hole, is just meeting folks that are instinctively like-minded, that share the same values, that are pro-freedom, that love life, that will not be captured and treated, like a piece of garbage because some psychopath thinks he has a God-given right to dictate how everybody should live and breathe. So there's a large number of lions out there that have said enough is enough. And this is what we're trying to see here. And we're empowering these people with the education and the skills that they need to remain unconfiscatable forever. At some point, they will take this knowledge, they will pass it along to their kids will pass it along to their kids. And that's how we move forward and put an end to this bullshit once and for all. It won't happen overnight, even though I wish I had a switch to make it occur that way, but it doesn't have to be. You can choose to opt out of this hellhole today, this instant, by simply, learning a few new steps and understanding what the fuss is about. So I'm very bullish on the future, very, very excited on the future, because I see it unfolding, in front of me.
Yeah, I really love that. And you have a lot of enthusiasm and gives me a lot of hope for improving self-custody, and that your option is out there. I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the biggest security risks that you see Bitcoin holders in self-custody, overlook or face.
Yeah, look, I mean, human error is human error, but it's completely avoidable with proper discipline. A lot of people still don't take this very seriously. They use whatever products out there, we cold wallets, hardware, software wallets, whatever it may be. They just use whatever and, hope for the best. This is not the right approach. For us, Bitcoin is generational wealth. So whatever amount of Bitcoin you have today, I'd say multiply that by like 1 million to understand the purchasing power that you're going to have at some point in the not so distant future. So is your current setup for that amount times 1 million good enough? Or are you going to have a heart attack thinking like, oh shit, something's not the way it's supposed to be? If that's your reaction, there's work to do, right? So this is where the proper skills, the proper education, the proper knowledge comes in. If you're the do-it-yourself type, there's plenty of amazing videos out there that you can sit down and watch carefully and and learn. If you're not that type of individual and you want to take a shortcut in order to get it right the first time, you can come to us, for example, or people like us that will walk you through the entire process. There's no mistakes. We've curated this process inside out. We're continuously obsessed with it on a daily basis to fine tune and improve wherever possible. So you will learn from the best of the best, and you will get it right the first time, and we'll be trained on it to become as comfortable as we are, no matter what the amount of money that you're using is. So whether you're transacting with $1 or $1 billion, the steps don't change. They're the same. And so the more you learn, the more you understand, the calmer you become. Like all the worry in the world becomes like distant noise once you understand more, right? The fear, the anxiety comes up because of the unknown. So if you are still fearful, it's because there's something you're not confident about yet. So how do you fix this? Well, you ask questions, you learn, you inquire, from folks that have more experience than you, more knowledge from you. You do your own research. You don't just blindly trust, whatever. Do your own research. Again, this comes down to personal responsibility. There's a lot of good people out there that are more than happy to assist and walk you through this journey, because this is it's like playing against the house. Bitcoin is not like a me only movement. It's an us movement against the house. We're playing against a very powerful enemy, which has been around for a very long time. So if everybody is going to start, acting on their own, this is a lose-lose situation. So it's a collective effort, which is why it upsets me to see when we have disagreements in the Bitcoin space. Like, for example, we're referencing back to the whole node argument, this is not where the attention has to be. I'm very upset that there are, seemingly corrupt actors now acting, with very bad intentions in the space, which again is very upsetting because these people are acting, very selfishly and are not looking at the big picture. They think this small win is enough, where in fact this will lead to their demise as well. So it's a team effort. Like the Bitcoin movement is a grassroots movement. Every one of us is Bitcoin. Every one of us needs to do their share. As a Bitcoiner, you must run a node. This is not optional. You must run a node. It's not hard. It's not expensive. It's like when people ask me, why do I run a node? I'm like, do you live in a house without a roof? Of course not. So think of it that way. Like if you don't want to get too technical, think of it that way. You need your roof. Otherwise, if you live in a house without one, you're going to get screwed at some point. So think of
But
it.
do you have a preference between core and not based on, or are
Listen,
you trying to say that there should be no of the silly fighting in between them?
both teams are clearly very intelligent people. Instead of bickering over who's right and who's wrong, or worse, trying to open up Bitcoin to something other than a monetary use, I don't agree with that. For me, Bitcoin is only money. I don't want to see garbage on the Bitcoin network. There's plenty of other shit coins that you can, you dump your junk on. You don't need to do it on Bitcoin. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? So the efforts to de-incentivize that, I encourage it. Now, is not going to prevent the spam entirely? Of course not. I mean, everybody who understands the tech knows this. However, the fact that NOTS is gaining so much globally sends a message. This is what the people want. This is what's important to us. This is what should matter. And anyone that wants to protect or cares about their freedom and their financial independence, this should matter to them as well. You don't need to understand the tech. If at a very simplistic level, do you support garbage and spam on a pristine monetary network? If your answer is no, go with NOTS. If you don't care, stay with core. I think more people are voting to go NOTS, not because they understand the tech, but because they are sending a message. This is what Bitcoin is. This is why it matters to us. We don't want you here. You want to do your spam? Go buzz off and play somewhere else. There's plenty of other blockchains that'll welcome you. You don't belong here, right? So people call that censorship. Call it whatever you want. It's keeping the house clean, right? So I'm more of in favor of that. How we can fix spam completely, I don't think that can be done without a hard fork, but holy shit, man, that's a whole experiment in and of itself that should not be taken lightly at all. So I'm very hopeful. There's a lot of very smart people that are on the right side of history. And, on a daily basis, these numbers grow and their supporters grow. So I remain very optimistic and bullish. And us at the Bitcoin Way, I mean, we continuously push out the right message. We don't side with anyone. Nobody pays us to do or say anything. We are like the neutral ground of this space. For us, for me especially, there's one mission: the separation of money and state. I don't want to hear about anything else when it comes to Bitcoin. Influencers, developers that talk about ETFs, treasuries, lending products, to me, these are all hypocrites. They're all fucking garbage. No one should be listening to them. That world should not be spoken of in the same line when you talk about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is self-custody, the separation of money and state. It's not integrating Bitcoin in that garbage world and sort of like extending its lifeline. So I get it that, that's how people are getting creative with it, but this is how 99% of folks are going to lose their funds and going to be separated from their Bitcoin, because at the end of the day, that is the intention.
Yeah. Well said. Well, I just want to quickly ask, because a lot of people on my channel ask about this. What are the risks for using devices like Ledger or Trezor? I know you promote air gap wallets as being the safest.
Mhm.
And I have spoken to many people who said that these types of wallets like Ledger and Trezor have not been hacked. But why do you go one step further?
Well, I'm not. First of all, Ledger is a closed source hardware. As a company, I believe they're compromised. So that's just like my personal opinion. They've been breached like God knows how many times. I don't trust them at all or recommend their products. And that's one side. Plus, they're closed source. We only focus on strict criteria. Open source, Bitcoin only by design. Open source or verifiable source. That's it. Fully air gapped. If it connects to the computer, I won't touch it, even though there may not be a problem with it right now. I've been in the world of cybersecurity for far too long to understand that something can break or something can be introduced at any point in time that can change that outcome. So why take the risk when you have the option not to? If it connects to a computer, I won't touch it. That's our philosophy at the Bitcoin Way. Of course, some people may disagree with that, and that's fine. However, we take an OCD approach to this. Even if it's an incremental improvement to us, it's 100 times worth it because I'm sleeping better at night knowing that that possibility is not happening. There's if your computer is compromised and you're not aware that it's compromised and you plug something in it, do you know what happens? You have no idea. Most people have no clue what happens. They plug it, everything works the way it's supposed to, but there's also something else going on in the background that's not visible on screen, right? Like, do you want to always, wonder, is this happening? Of course not. So if you don't want to put those crazy thoughts and elevate your anxiety level even more, then, just avoid it entirely. So that's the approach that we take here, which is why we're very strict on that criteria. You don't need an open buffet of products. You just need some really good ones. And there are some excellent ones that we work with on a daily basis and we recommend every single time. And if tomorrow a new product enters the space that's better, you can be sure that we will be recommending it. Because I test these things regularly and we try to blow them up internally. If we fail, we put them on a recommendation list. If we don't fail, then we don't even talk about them. So, and it's not just about the product, Paula. It's also about the company behind the product. So if some companies support censorship or chain analysis, as an ethos of the company, I don't give a shit how good their product is. I don't mention them, right? So again, the Bitcoin ethos needs to be followed exactly as intended. There's no maybe 1 foot here, 1 foot there. You do it right, or you don't do it at all. You can't have it both ways. So this is a once in a historical lifetime opportunity to build the world that we want. Okay, compromising, taking shortcuts, being flippant about this or that is not optional. We all have to put on our paranoid hats because we're up against something that is extremely dangerous, that is going to fight tooth and nail in order to try and prevent this world from existing. I personally don't think they will win. They're already failing. It's very clear. And they will continue to fail. However, you don't need to be a casualty during the transition into that future world. So that requires personal responsibility, staying on top of things, doing things the right way.
Yeah, yeah, that explains it well. So for our last question, Tony, how has your life changed since living on the Bitcoin standard, and how are you living life on your terms?
Bitcoin saved my life. For about a year after the collapse, I wasn't sure if I'd actually be around to tell the story. And it was only up until I still remember it, the afternoon where I stumbled across this Andreas Antonopoulos video that I think I smiled for the first time, after a year. And it was very, very difficult, to try to get back on your feet when you are, swimming against an impossible tide in a geographical location that is not safe. So you've got all these enemies coming at you, and you just have to, figure out your way through them, literally living from day to day, sometimes hour by hour. So it was very painful, very horrific. I still keep the trauma alive in my head just so that I don't forget it and I don't allow myself to be complacent or forget what the whole purpose of my existence is now. It's not to make money. I don't give a shit about the money anymore. For me, this is a mission to help enough people adopt this new way of life so that at some point collectively the old one becomes irrelevant. Nobody needs to go to war with anyone. Nobody needs to go out killing on a killing spree. This is the peaceful revolution. Enough people adopt it. It dies from irrelevancy on its own. And that is the mission here, right? Like, I mean, even on a Bitcoin standard, it wasn't like, magic wand and, you're back on your feet. It wasn't. After about 4 years, I started to, breathe a little bit easy. And since then, it's been progressively getting better because you see, not only are you saving in money that is actually money, but it's also appreciating in value. So you've got like this extra push that is also helping. So whatever Bitcoin I was earning, because all the services that I was offering, I wasn't accepting anything else. So that was already like a huge challenge in and of itself in a world where nobody even knows about Bitcoin. So get alone somebody to accept it, it was like mission impossible. But, tiny baby steps, eventually you get to a point where it starts becoming, a worthwhile amount. And you start to live and breathe again. And, as it appreciates, it pushes you that much further. So that's how my life improved. And I don't look back on the banking system or the fiat system. I don't think about it at all, except for the day where it becomes completely irrelevant. In my head, it doesn't exist. I don't think about them anymore. But, I'm me and the world is still nowhere near where I am in my head. But again, very few people have walked in my shoes and have come from where I have in order to get to this level of conviction. And I pray they don't, because it's really not a pretty place. So there's the money side of things, the financial sovereignty. You own your Bitcoin in self-custody. But another thing that you realize very quickly once that becomes like when you put that out of the way, you realize that you also need your jurisdictional sovereignty. You cannot be financially comfortable living in a dangerous place. You have to ensure that your safety, and if you have a family and kids, that they're also, accounted for. So the road to self-sovereignty is two pieces. You've got the money and you've got the jurisdiction. You can't have one without the other. It's a piece of the same puzzle. They have to fit. You need both of them. You secure your money, Bitcoin in self-custody, and you secure your jurisdiction where you live, where your safety is ensured, where they value you as a human being, where you're surrounded by, like-minded individuals. And all of these things are services that, we work with individuals on a daily basis to help them go from point A to that world that, we've been living in for about 3 years now.
Well, thank you so much, Tony. We didn't get into the Plan B residency, but we will talk about that next time.
Sure.
And you mentioned that's part of, yes, living the sovereign life, having a safe place to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I will post links to the Bitcoin Way and your other accounts. But thank you so much for joining me today. I really
My
enjoyed
pleasure,
this.
Paula. It was great being here. I had a really good conversation, and I hope your viewers find it very useful. And if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me any time of day. My DMs are open.
Thank you so much. You have a really powerful message. I'm sure it helped a lot of people.
Thank you very much.